Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Daniel Bishop, and I'm going to be leading this webinar. I don't plan on spending a lot of time with this, and this topic is we're going to give you a 30,000-foot view of synchronizing border data. Depending on which state you live in and which county you are living in as well. This might be a little bit ahead of the game for your purposes, but it's always good to have your eyes a little bit further afield to kind of know what's ahead. What we're planning on doing today is just talking through three principal points on coordinating border data with NG9-1-1. Let me preface this and say, if you are still needing to migrate your emergency management data from your previous schema into the NG9-1-1 schema, depending upon the state's specificities, I would encourage you to do that before coordinating with surrounding PSAPs. So this should be done after the data schema migration and general internal error corrections. So making sure that those fishbone analysis are, largely correct, making sure that your ranges for road center lines align with the addresses that you have within the boundaries of your county or PSAP. And also making sure that all of your emergency response areas, so fire, law, EMS, those are all seamless and don't overlap with each other. So internal topologies are important. But for this webinar, we're going to focus on coordinating with surrounding PSAPs and what we should do there. First off, the goal here is to create a seamless network, so no gaps or overlaps. It's fairly easy for data maintainers within a PSAP to manage data that we control within our PSAP boundaries. So as long as there are no political infightings on where a police boundary lies, it's easy for us to kind of make those corrections and correct those topologies to make sure that there are no overlaps or gaps internally. However, when we're dealing with multiple jurisdictions, it can become a little bit more complicated. So this is our goal, making sure that our data and the surrounding PSAP data is coordinated so that we have a seamless network with no gaps or overlaps. The issue here is, if we get say a cell phone call that happens within a gap of service area, then that can introduce some issues with proper response. All right, our first thing to do whenever you're embarking on coordinating data is first to find out who is responsible, your equivalent essentially, who's responsible for the NG9-1-1 data for your surrounding PSAP boundaries, any jurisdictions around you. This can take some time. It might take some investigation, sending some emails, finding out, hey, who is involved with NG9-1-1 in your bordering PSAP area. Some PSAPs may be contracted with a third-party vendor who will do those edits for them, in which case you need to become in contact with that vendor so that you can communicate data and communicate with that person directly. Another note, some PSAPs, some counties have policies against sharing or changing data. So if you have any policies that you're aware of that might prevent data sharing, now is the time to make sure that we kind of address those policy issues so that there can be an ease and flow of data sharing between these parties, these surrounding parties. Also, depending on your state and the policies within the state, there may be a centralized data hub that's set up in the course of this NG9-1-1 initiative, where PSAPs can upload their data to that particular state hub. And that has the effect of, providing a centralized data hub where you know where to go get that data, you know where you can send your data to. It just helps with the streamlining effect of communication. All right, so once you know who is around you, who that person is for your surrounding PSAPs or surrounding jurisdictions, here are the priorities of coordination. First off, you want to make sure that you coordinate on your PSAP and provisioning boundary data layers. And that's simply because these are going to be the external boundaries of the data that you're managing. So if you don't coordinate on those, then it's going to introduce some errors later on. So what I'm proposing here is the most efficient way of coordinating data. There are obviously different ways of doing this, but for efficiency's sake, this is what I recommend. Coordinate with surrounding PSAPs on where your PSAP and provisioning boundaries lie. There might be some overlaps or gaps that need to be addressed, but first focus on those. Then move on to your emergency response areas. That's our law, EMS, and fire boundaries. And lastly, road center lines. Road center lines are the most complicated data set that we will need to coordinate on. So saving that for last, after our polygon or area geometries are taken care of, will greatly streamline this process. So the main thing when we're talking about PSAP and provisioning boundaries, there are two ways we can go about this. One is direct boundary agreements, so direct coordination with that bordering jurisdiction. So you have your shared boundaries and you talk directly with that person and communicate like, all right, I'll move my boundary to you, or you move your boundary to me, or find a middle ground somewhere. And if you have some issues on where that boundary should meet, perhaps a third-party boundary could be used to provide a line of demarcation for both PSAPs to kind of agree upon. The state of Illinois just suggested using the 2020 census county boundaries for that third-party matching purpose. That's a great idea. Sometimes you can use a different third-party boundary, but the census boundary is kind of a go-to. All right, after you agree upon your PSAP and provisioning boundary area, then you can move on to your emergency response areas. There, in large part, it's going to be coordination with the PSAP and provisioning boundary that requires the most communication. Once you have those set, then it's really just kind of moving your emergency response areas to that new boundary or moving it back. Just because there has to be, like, one of the rules is any response areas and your center lines need to be encompassed by your PSAP and provisioning boundary features. So using a topology set up for those layers to kind of highlight any issue areas will kind of help you most efficiently identify where the areas are mismatching. All right, moving on to road center line coordination and the options we have. So we're going to cover three primary coordination methods for road center lines. I want to preface this by saying that these coordination methods are derived from different state best practice documents. So depending upon the state that you're in, your state may have a preference on which type of method you use. But all three of these have been used by various states. So I want to make you aware of different methods with the preface that your state may have a strong suggestion of which one you should use. First, we're going to talk about the coincident line, Centerline method or stacked methodology, then parallel lines, and then finally, the most rare case, singular upload. All right, so with coincident line Centerline methods, we essentially have we're talking about a center line that runs alongside our PSAP and provisioning boundary territory. So with a coincident center line method, we need our road center line to be on that boundary itself, and to run, and for both parties, both entities, PSAP entities, to have identical geometries on that for that road center line. So here we have a hypothetical screenshot of our home PSAP agency on the left and our theoretical bordering agency. We can see that all of our road center lines are stacked one on top of the other, so it looks unified. There are no changes in the geometry at all. And going to the next slide. For this coincident method, they need to be coincident with our provisioning boundary. And if you need to make sure that that boundary is coincident, we recommend using the align or reshape tool to allow exact geometry coordination with that provisioning boundary or PSAP boundary and that road center line. You can find that reshape or align tool if you're using ArcPro. It's going to be in your edit tab, and then whenever you're editing, you're going to use this reshape tool here. So in this hypothetical situation, if our geometry in our road center line is identical between bordering PSAPs, and the geometry is stacked, so identical between those two, and it runs along our provisioning and PSAP boundary, the next thing we need to turn to is what attributes should these road center lines have. So taking the stance of our home PSAP, so we're really looking at this through the lens of the entity on the left side of this hypothetical. We need to have our address ranges populated, as well as our incorporated municipalities on the left and our county on the left. And then for the right hand or the right side attribute fields, we really need to make sure that we're using the validation right field is populated with the value of n or nulled out. And this allows that field or for that data to be recognized as a bordering road center line, and therefore those address ranges are not looked at for response areas. However, you can populate incorporated municipalities or county fields on the right-hand side with the appropriate jurisdiction. So just to kind of restate that, on our left-hand side, again, we're populating our municipalities and our county fields on the left, as well as our address range from 2. on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, from our home agency's perspective, there will be no range fields, so no right from or right to. Our validation right field is populated with an N, and our incorporated municipality right and county right will have the appropriate PSAP jurisdictional name. All right. Another possible coordination method for road centerlines is our parallel centerline method. This essentially allows a little, it's not the most geographically accurate representation of our road centerlines. You can see here that we have the road centerlines running parallel and within the PSAP boundaries of each agency. And this allows the home agency to maintain their road center line as they would like to. There does not need to be any coordination for like identical geometries necessary. However, there does need to be coordination on any intersections. Those intersections need to snap together and be precise. So from our home agency's perspective, it will just run into this intersection and then again diverge, so that the only border aspect is right along the PSAP provisioning boundary at the intersection. With this method, this road center line is treated as an interior road center line, so it is not bordering because the geometry itself is not on the PSAP or provisioning boundary line. It is within the boundary. Therefore, the validation aspect is unnecessary. That validation field, I should clarify. All right, lastly, this is a very unique situation where we have a singular upload. So in this case, if both jurisdictions have a road center line that it runs along its boundary, PSAP boundary or provisioning boundary, and they use the same name for that road segment. So again, we're going to be using some contingencies to allow us to use this. So if it has the same road name for both jurisdictions, then you can coordinate with that bordering agency to accurately populate the ranges from to for both sides. So similar to our coincident method, but this time we're using, we're populating both range values. We're also populating the jurisdictions, municipalities, and range fields, similar to our coincident method. However, when uploading to the state or to the EZNet provider, one of these jurisdictions would essentially remove that center line from the upload and rely upon the other PSAP to do the upload for that road center line. So essentially it's coordinating that road center line and just having one of the PSAPs upload both sides of both attribute sides of that road center line. Clearly, this is not ideal for most PSAP and provisioning entities, because there is, most people like to have a clear or control the data within their PSAP boundary. So this would work if you have a really close relationship with that bordering agency, and there's a very clear communication flow. So if there were to be any geometry or attribute changes that needed to be made to that road center line, you would be able to make those changes in coordination with the bordering agency quickly and without any fear of error.